Hello, baseball fans, and welcome to the Locked On Guardians podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Ellis, formerly a scout, formerly 24/7, where I was the lead draft and prospect analyst for both of those sites. Wednesday show should have hinted you in on that as we went all draft, talking about some of the big stories for last week. We'll try to figure out how to do some more draft content. I'm also going to talk with Lindsay about doing some crossovers. We also have some big things planned in terms of the Locked On Network and how we're going to handle baseball during this lockout. I want to thank you for making Locked On Guardians your first listen today and every day, wherever it is that you get podcasts. Today's show, we're going to talk about the Fangraphs Top 100. We are now have enough Top 100 lists out there to really see a changing of perspective and just a changing in general of how the prospects are ranked. I mean, remember when I was like, okay, so I'm going to be lower on Ty Freeman. I'm going to have him down my list. The more times I revisited him, the more I kept kind of dropping him. And he was this guy who midseason was the top prospect in the Indian system, according to MLB.com. So, there's your spoiler. Before we get too much farther, this cold open has gone long. But yeah, talking about prospect lists, doing some mailbags, all of that in a moment.
You are Locked On Guardians, your daily podcast on the Cleveland Guardians, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we're back. So, let's talk prospects. Now, I didn't go in depth. I talked about Keith Laws, but Keith, I'm going to respect the paywall. I was someone who had a paywall when I was at Scout, and you make a lot of your money until the very end of my time at 24/7. Honestly, it's like the subscription was that's where the majority of your money came in. That was where you got most of your funding. Towards the end, I figured out how to properly do some listing with some help from people over there at 24/7. And then, honestly, I was making more from ads than I was from the subscription revenue. But it's important, and I value that, and I'm not going to take that away from Keith. I think it's, okay, I pay for one service right now. It's The Athletic. I think it's worth your time and money. I'm just going to put that out there. That is my one pay service. But I am willing to talk about the fan groups listing a little more in depth, primarily because it's a free list. This is not one where, I'm giving away someone else's content. Let's put it that way when we're discussing this list. And your Cleveland Guardians had 7 guys in here. And it's surprising because players 6 and 7 are George Valera and Ty Freeman. And that goes against a lot of what you're probably used to hearing. And part of the reason I'll say that, they explain it well. And it's some of the stuff that I've heard as well. There's things in there that, for instance, people love George Valera. I love George Valera. He's probably going to be my number one prospect when I really sit down, hammer it all out. I believe in him. I like the production. I like everything else that's in place with him. But I can understand if you are lower on him because there have been concerns about the K rate, the swing. I've talked about on the show. Go back to when I was lower on Valera when he first got in the system, where I was like, we can't keep saying this guy's going to have a plus hit tool based on the statistical performance. Now you're not seeing that anymore, by the way. But if you've listened to this podcast, you can go in and you can hear that. You can go back to probably this time a year ago, maybe this time 2 years ago. We're approaching 700 episodes. I've been here for a while. You can hear all of my takes, spicy to mild. But my spicy take on George Valera was everyone saying this guy's got a sweet swing. And this is where, again, baseball, maybe it's just baseball media. I don't know about baseball itself. I'm not behind the closed doors. But baseball media is very poor when it comes to evaluating hit tools. And I think baseball in and of itself is very poor when it comes to evaluating hit tools. And that's why we see, again, in the recent players the Indians have drafted who, quote-unquote, had the best hit tools in their entire draft college grouping were Naquin and Zimmer. And Zimmer, you can go back to that data. Zimmer I had as, I want to say the 8th or 9th highest ranked player on my board. He would never be there today. I know enough now, years later, to look at that and be like, okay, he is a small school guy striking out at his percentage rate. This is not good. This is a big concern. He probably still would have been a first rounder, don't get me wrong, but instead of 8th, he would have probably been 28th or around there, around where he was actually drafted. But Valera, that was the same thing. And why does someone like Valera get that plus hit tool? Why does someone get the label of a plus hit tool? Pretty swing, right? I mean, you hear those words connected many times. Pretty swing. Now you go and you look at the Fangraphs report. They list his hit tool in the future as a 40 grade tool, below average. I don't disagree with that. I don't think he is going to be a plus hitter. But you go back to 2 years ago, you go back to the 2020 season, and I mean, I'm discussing the top prospect list. You can hear me probably have this same debate where I sit there and say, he's a really interesting prospect. The power is there, the walk rate is there, but he's not a plus hit tool guy. That's just not the case. And anyone who's saying that, doesn't understand how baseball statistics work. So it is, this is toot my own horn. If I was good with graphics as we're doing this, I want to remind people to go subscribe to the YouTube channel. Help me out. Let's get all the revenue streams we can. Yeah, it's a bit mercenary, but think about it. If I can get enough revenue from this, then this would be my only thing. I could just concentrate. If you're a fan of the show, I'm not asking you to pay for anything. I'm just saying download daily, subscribe to the YouTube. Help me out. 700 episodes in, I'm not asking for much. But to get back to it, this is the toot my own horn segment, as it were. Because, I mean, this is exactly what I said. Now you look at his profile all these years later, and the Fangraphs 2022 reporting on him is exactly what I told you 2 years ago, which is not what the consensus was. Now, I'm not as low on this, and I think he's still going to be fine. I think the 45 field might be, if you're viewing him as a center fielder, he's probably a left fielder. He's a lefter fielder. No, he's a left fielder more than likely. But yeah, I think he's a guy with, the comp I said a year ago for his bat was a more dynamic Carlos Santana. Now, there's going to be people who don't like that, but I'll stand by it. Like, that still feels pretty good. Now, again, we also know we're waiting on the Zips prospect. We have the one from a year ago. The Zips prospect, the most successful prospect rankings in terms of success and prediction have been from Zips. Those are the different ones. And again, I'll point out last year, Zips had Nolan Jones at 6. So I still think he's one of those guys that people are way, way, way sleeping on right now. But yeah, so let's get back into it. At 6th, they had George Valera essentially in the Indian system. I think he's got 65 grade power, and I think he'll walk enough. You'd like to see how he continues to progress through the system. I think he's probably the number one prospect in system. I think that is a bit low in my personal view on Valera. But if that one bothers you, how about at 109? By the way, I don't love the 108 one. I'm much higher than Dylan Dingler at 108, but 109 Ty Freeman. They talk about the David Fletcher comp, which is, that's probably a good comp. That is the comp that makes sense. And you go and you look at David Fletcher's stats, and I believe we talked about this in the middle of the season. He had a down year this past year. Why was her numbers down? Because when you are a contact hitter who doesn't have power, below average power, Freeman's going to be like you're hoping for double-digit home runs and like 30 doubles. Like, that is his power. He has below average exit velocity. There isn't power there. So if he rakes, the problem with someone who rakes as a hitter and doesn't have power and doesn't really walk is there's always a degree of luck. You could be the best hitter in the world, and if it is a year where things just don't fall right, you're going to have a down year. And like I said, David Fletcher, you can just look at his few years and the up and down, and it's part of the reason as well, like Oscar Mercado has struggled. Now, Mercado doesn't have anywhere near the hit tool or the hit ability or the contact ability of Ty Freeman, but David Fletcher this past year had a 70 for his runs created plus. He had a 262 average, 297 on base, 324 slugging. In 2020, he hit 319 with a 376 on base, 425 slugging. Now, that was the year that he also had a 348 BAPIP. That was a high year for BAPIP. This was the low year, 287. The other 2 years, 307, 317, but an 86 and a 96. Like, David Fletcher's been a solid hitter, but he struggled to be a league average hitter. And this year, he was well below league average, but he's only had one season. He would have had two where he generated a WAR over 2. And that's kind of where Freeman is. It's hard to see a path for him to be what people expect. The other player I compared him to was Jeremy Mejia. No, JC Mejia was the pitcher. Francisco Mejia, the catcher. And it's a similar profile. And that has been why I've been lower on Freeman. So this is kind of hey, people are finally agreeing with me. Now, having said this, I should probably check the time here. Oh, we're pretty good in terms of where we're recording and talking. But, actually, let's take first commercial break. We've talked about the bottom 2. Let's talk about the top 5 in a moment. Hey, let's talk about our good friends over at Built Bar. I'm going to pull up the site and see if they're doing anything special and new. And the reason you should go to BuiltBar.com and always check out the site is because there's always something popping up. How about right now? Shop today only. Well, by the time you're hearing it, you're not going to be able to. But 25% off a warehouse sale. Sorry, that probably got super loud in there. That means everything's on sale. Built Bar Crave, that's a fantastic bar. I love that. Eggnog, I've been intrigued by. Fruity cereals already sold out. They sold out of mint marshmallow, raspberry cheesecake. Everything's selling out. I'm going to go place an order. And you should go place orders at BuiltBar.com and make sure to check out the site like I did today on a lark. Because there's always sales going on. And when you get something like this 25% off sale, guess what? You can still use the promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off of that. So you get 25% off, and then you get 15 off the 25%. And if you're someone like me who is buying Built Bars every 3 months, you're building up your Built Bucks, then you're probably saving like another $5 off. You're getting such a good deal on a bar that gets an A from my health food app when I sit down and enter it in. And also is the best tasting bar. I've been eating this thing for 2-3 years. I get tired of everything. I don't get tired of Built Bar. Go to Built Bar for yourself. Check it out. BuiltBar.com. Remember that promo code is LOCKED15. Okay, so we talked about the bottom 2. One, I agree with the overall scouting reports, but I still think Valera's got a little more power upside. Like I think Valera could be a 35 home run guy. Like there is just so much strength in that bat. He's not the biggest guy. And there is a lot of swing and miss, but I think he's got more power potential. But I do get it. I have concerns with him as when it comes to that hit tool. But what's interesting is Nolan Jones, by the way, is 5th. He's higher. They have him listed as a left fielder. It's interesting. I understand, I don't understand why he's listed as a left fielder. Like unless you're like, well, it's the least amount of ground to cover. He's got a really good arm. Like that doesn't fit. And, they point out really well they just point out that he hit 251, 361, 468 after his bad May. Like, May was a disaster for him. He got back to being where he was. He's a big dude, and I don't have a lot of players that I felt small around. Like, I'm 6 feet tall. Jones is one of the few of them. And, another great stat here in the Fangraphs piece is that 44% of his career crate appearances, apparently I'm going to say, ended in a walk or strikeout. He does get on base a lot. So why is he here? Why is he higher than Valera, you might ask? I think they view him as worse hit tool, but better potential power. I think they're very similar in score, don't get me wrong, but I think they view them as almost similar types, even though he's a worse defender. Nolan Jones was doing it in AAA as opposed to Valera doing it and getting up to AA, but I don't quite understand that placement. And again, I say this as someone who sits back and says, people are jumping off Nolan Jones way too quickly. Way, way, way too quickly. He is the guy that everyone wants to throw in as a secondary piece of trade, and it's like, the Indians aren't going to sell low on someone who's hurt, and A, who's hurt, and B, who's coming off a down year. That's just not what they do. That is not this organization at all. So who are the next players up? Who are the other players that we have to talk about on this list for the Cleveland Guardians? So after we get past Nolan Jones, at 9, he was 101, 103 for Valera, 109 for Ty Freeman, Gabriel Arias at 92. Similar in many ways to Jones and Valera. Power, contact concerns. An elite defender. They had a really good comp in here for him, where when you look at what he could be, Orlando Arcia, and I remember when he was on the top 10 prospects in all of baseball when he came up with the Brewers, and he started to put it together this year for the Braves, and he was a solid contributor for them, but putting it all together I thought he had a good year at the Braves. I don't have the split available. for it, but like, he just never, consistently, he was a below average hitter. His highest runs created plus was a 95. Strong defender. And, if that's what you think he's going to be, then yeah, that's an issue, because all of a sudden, Gabriel Arias is not someone you can trust at that shortstop position. I told you I was told by someone that there's some concerns with his swing and that his approach and his hit tool. I guess it's, how much do you believe in that? How much do you believe in just what he did as his age relative to level, skipping AA? There's a lot of things to like there. But when you're looking at the three of them, Jones and Valera and Gabriel Arias, Arias plays the elite position, and he's the highest, played at the highest level. Jones, not an elite position, but has played at a higher level, and Valera might have better tools than Jones, but played at just a level short and has not had as many looks at the upper parts. Now, this is where it gets interesting. So they're another one that's super high on Steve Kwan. Steve Kwan at 57. I mean, I feel like maybe was maybe we all were. Like, a lot of people were debating if he'd be added to the 40-man, myself included. He really did a lot to make it so you had to add him. He is one of those guys who came out, and this past year, that's the thing. It's funny if you go back to 2019. He played in 123 games. We talked about him on the podcast at points. It's like he's doing well. He started out really hot, kind of came back to earth, had no power at all. Had a 382 slugging, and what's the big change here? Well, when you look at what he did in AA this past year, his BABIP was unsustainably high. So he's not really a 337 hitter. That's one of the things that you look at the difference between his batting average in 2019 and his batting average in 2021. It's a 49-point difference in BABIP, and his batting average had a 57-point swing. So that kind of shows you what's going on there. But, the 382 slugging, he slugged at both levels, over 500. That's a significant change. He's making a ton more contact. Yeah, that's my elderly cat who just decided to disrupt the podcast. 14-year-old's diabetic, no teeth. He's just got to be the center of everything. Apparently not a Steve Kwan fan. But for Kwan, it's that power jump, which is the difference here. I mean, he was, I don't know, do I want to say he was Ernie Clement before Ernie Clement? I feel like he was drafted the year before him. He was just the up-the-middle type. You're projecting as a backup who doesn't strike out much, who has good contact rates. And then, honestly, they didn't expect this. Nobody did. There's no way, because if they'd expected it, he would have been, more a part of things. He would have been someone who was, in all the instructs, in all the camps, everything like that. It was a surprising breakout for him this year. And he's got a legit chance to make this team. I truly believe that he will have a chance to make the Cleveland Guardians as an outfielder. He should be, a solid defender, likely in left field long term. And you're kind of counting and betting on that, and that he'll make good contact and he'll fall into a few home runs. And I was kind of thinking, I don't know if this is a bad comp or not. I'm going to pull up the stats right now. Like, what popped into my head was Wayne Kirby. And maybe this is just because I'm 40 and I'm a child of those 90s teams. No, Wayne Kirby actually wasn't that good in retrospect. Never mind. He was an okay defender, but Wayne Kirby was not good. Like, you have those players in your mind because they're from your childhood where you're like, oh, no, he was a solid, third outfield type. No, not at all. But with Kwan, you're kind of looking at, like I said, an above-average offensive profile, and if he's playing left field, an above-average defensive profile, 3 to 4 win player, that might happen. That could happen. The prospects, the Fangraphs one, the Brett Gardner comp was interesting. I'm like, there's some logic to that. He's a good player. He is I understand he should probably be. I should have had him higher rated. That's on me. Because, again, statistical performance is there. And, sometimes I get, when I look at a guy who's, 24 or 23, was one of the, he was older at AA than some of the other top prospects. At AAA, he was about the average age. The breakout coming late. And, honestly, I think there's some value in a guy being 5'9". Now, that may not be what you expect to hear, but when you have Kwan's profile where it's like, well, he's not, his swing isn't designed for power. He knows his strike zone. It's harder to hit because he's smaller. I think that plays up and helps him, but that makes 2 to 3 places now all very high on Kwan. You'll see when MLB posts theirs, he'll jump just because he's jumping everywhere. Espino at 54, just 3 spots higher. And everything I've said is what's been said here. It's like, if it all works out, it's great. But there's a large contingent of us who feel like injuries seem very likely. The third pitch is inconsistent. That he's, he can miss a lot of bats. There is Daniel Espino. There is a case where he wins multiple Cy Youngs, and there is a case where he just turns into Danny Salazar. Like there are, you can line things out for me in any number of directions, and I could believe it. He's a lotto ticket. It's going to be very interesting to see what he can do, and as he progresses up the line, because he's one of those few prospects too we have not seen in the upper minors, and that is such a huge separator just in terms of selectiveness of both hitters and control when it comes to the pitchers. One top prospect for the second list in a row is Brayan Rocchio, and you get it, right? He's always been well thought of, and there are going to be people out there. Yes, I've been lower on him than the field. That's fair. I was very low on him when he was a top prospect because the performance was kind of average-ish, and we didn't get those opportunities. And I believe like last year he wasn't in the instructs because he couldn't get out of Venezuela because of COVID issues. So we've had kind of those limited opportunities in general, but he broke out this year. He totally became the player everyone thought he was going to be because he had the opportunity, and that happens. And in my defense, part of the reason I was lower on him is I don't really trust guys until we get that look. And it's, you look at the prospects. It was like him and Aaron Braccio, and this past year showed Braccio completely fell off. He's gonna have to prove that he's a real strong prospect, or even like a top 40 prospect going forward for me. But on the other side of things, you had Rocchio, who stepped up, and I'm just gonna be nervous until I can get track record. That's just what it always comes down to with me. I am such a stat head that I need track record, I need video, I need things I can follow and check. And for every player who works out like a Brayan Rocchio, I always go back to Kevin Metienne just because he was the guy. You've probably heard this so many times in this podcast, but I included him on our top 100 prospect list at Scout just because everyone else did, and I felt like, okay, this is a universal view. I hated putting a 16-year-old that I had almost no video on, but everyone's like, okay, he's a generational prospect. He's never going to play in the big leagues, more than likely. That's just the truth of it at this point in time. So I'm always the person, I'm okay with being the last one if it means that my percentage is still better. Like that I'm still not making a list of a bunch of guys in high A and then watching as they don't work out. So I'm still going to be the one leaning more towards what we've seen than what we're projecting to see. I'm going to take a break, come back, and take some questions from you, the fans of Locked On Guardians. Football might be over for this season, but basketball is in full steam for both pro and college hoops. From the latest odds, totals, player performance props, to where to find where the next fired coach is going to land, BetOnline.net is the number one spot for all your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports, scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, UFC odds, right to your Olympic coverage and information. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. This episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. Rock Auto saves you time and money. American-owned company, saving do-it-yourselfers for 20-plus years. They have reliably low prices for every customer. They have everything you need. Here in my ad read, it talks about brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, and even new carpet. I always say air filters and windshield wipers. You get such an upcharge on those. Those are places to save you money. And the fun thing about Rock Auto is you can save even more if you're checking their rebates and discount sections. They're trying to help you save even more. Go and explore their easy-to-use website. I know nothing about cars. I am not a car person. I can navigate fine to find a solution to your auto parts needs And remember, when you go to rockauto.com right now to see all the parts available for your car or truck, right locked on in the How'd You Hear About Us box, so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. So let's take some questions. Let's start at the beginning. I've got some dating back to the beginning of February. And again, hit me up on Twitter at JeffMLBDraft. It helps me out. I start building up the mailbag so we can do a bunch of these at once. We'll see. Probably won't get through all of them, just in terms of knowing myself and knowing how I tend to go long on questions. But let's start with Daniel Phillips at GiveMeFood_84. Question for future mailbags. Bradley Zimmer, with having a new hitting coach, how bad Cleveland's outfield is, wouldn't it be worth seeing if the coaching change might bring extra consistency to him at the plate? I saw this and I immediately went, yeah, no, of course. It makes sense for everything I've talked about on this show, right? That he has sat there and he has all those physical tools. Joe Doyle, who you might know from what he's written through the years about the Mariners and over at the Prospects site, he wants the Mariners to trade for him. Bradley Zimmer has fans all over. It's because the tools are there, and everyone always gets suckered by tools. And you're saying, wait, you're saying, well, yeah, but if I would sit down. If you are the management, there's only so much you can do right now. But you could talk to Chris Valeka. You can sit there and have him watch videos and see what he thinks. But yeah, there's a lot to be said. Now, this is what stinks about, one of the many things that stinks about the lockout. Because Bradley Zimmer is exactly the toolsy type of guy you would want this new hitting coach who's an advanced thought and does a lot of cool things to dive into and just rip apart and try to fix. Unfortunately, that's not happening. But it's a great question, and I agree. If he doesn't get traded, that's why. They think there's something there. And again, physical tools, his physical tools are as good as anyone on the Indians. At TribeFan145, Bill Stauffer, assuming no trades, who are your 5 starters for the Guardians on opening day? Same question for AAA Columbus. 5 starters opening day, Bieber, Quantrill, Savale, Plesac, McKenzie. So if we're doing that, I think you have Eli Morgan down in AAA, Cody Morris down in AAA. Let me pause and look at my list. This is top of my head. Well, I guess it'd be unfair to look, but if you got Morris, Tobias Myers would be who they traded for, would be one of the 3 guys I would really look at and consider for the Indians down in AAA. I keep saying the Indians. I should say the Guardians down in AAA. It's going to take a while to break me of that. Let's be honest. I wish I could say I'm just going to do it better tomorrow. I'm not. Old 40-year-old habits are hard to break. But yeah, so we assume Eli Morgan. We assume they'll have. Doesn't everyone love someone scanning down to look at a list? Myers, Morris, Pilkington, and Morgan are an easy 4. And then Peyton Badenfield's someone they got to add. So either him or let's go Adam Scott, actually. If they keep Adam Scott, let's assume he'll be the starter down in AAA. Okay, so from at Michael 20-9, love all the analysis of the MLB draft from the Guardians' point of view. Can you talk about the international free agent signings will be held this year, and also is the possibility of an international draft still being considered? I expected more in the CBA talks. I never know. Excuse me. I never really know about the international stuff because, again, my whole approach is what can I actually get reports and stats and numbers on? And when you're talking about 15, 16-year-old kids, it's only reports. So I'm never too deep. That's always a failing of mine. You can only follow so much. That's not mine. I think a draft will happen. I honestly think it'll come out of the CBA. I think we will see a draft. It's one of those things that's been discussed. I think it's only a matter of time before it occurs. And let's take one from our old friend and former co-host at tangible_uno, Pat. He thoughts on the ascension of Steve Kwan and the adjustments he's made to his approach to tapping into more power. Kind of talked about this on the show a bit. It is all about the power with him and what he has done, and that is really the step forward for him. And it's really interesting that he's made that because, again, he's not someone who was a priority prospect. I'm not even sure if he was. I don't believe he was in that camp in 2020 of players who were there. I would love to kind of read more, and I think honestly, it's whatever he did is one of those things that the Indians should really look at and figure out. Oh, he's tapped into something. Maybe this is an approach we should do with more of our hitters. I think the step forward is unexpected. His ascension throughout the year. We didn't even talk about him as much on the podcast, right? There were so many other players popping at various points in time, and it's a very quiet profile that you just give him all the kudos in the world. And, if you want to get into it, to a degree, if we want to get hyperbolic, the last time if you want to look at a major league player who made kind of similar things to him was, kid got home. Some of the similar things in terms of changing adjustment, looking at what you're doing in terms of your swing and stuff like that. With Cedric Mullins, I'm not saying he's Cedric Mullins. I'm not saying he's going to be one of the best hitters in all of baseball, but I'm also not saying that he can't continue to improve. I'm also not saying that what he is now, the Brett Gardner comp is the end-all be-all. Let's see what this guy does. Let's see what he does when he's a priority player and gets opportunities. He has not had a lot of time in the minors. It was 2018, he had 17 games. 2019 was 123, none in 2020, and then 123 this past year. He's missed out on some developmental time, and I'll be curious to see. Heck, Zips projects him to have a 111 runs created plus next year in the big leagues. Projects him to have a 111. Just to give you an idea, for the Cleveland Guardians last year, do you know how many players on the Guardians had better than a 111 runs created plus? Well, I'll sit here and tell you. You had, of course, Jose Ramirez, who had a 137. You had Franmil Reyes at a 125. Jordan Luplow had a 113 for his time here. And that's it. That's the entire list. Everyone else is below that. So, yeah, that's impressive. So we'll have to keep checking in. I want to thank you again for listening to Locked On Indians today and every day, wherever it is you get podcasts. I should say Locked On Guardians today and every day, wherever it is you get podcasts. And as we end every show now, go Guardians, go.